Les, what's going on, man? Great to see you today.
Hey, thank you very much.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it. I've been following you for a while. And admittedly, I'm not in the survival outdoor space, although I see a huge need for it. And I'm constantly trying to improve my abilities as a man, and being able to survive and being creative and all of these things that you do is a crucial component of this.
Well, thank you. I think I don't know how much manliness I like to ascribe to it. I think it definitely gets kind of lumped in, if you will, with that sort of ambiance of thought, I suppose. But yeah, it's a good, rugged, outdoorsy thing to be involved in. That's for sure.
What makes you say that? You don't know how much manliness is associated with it? Because here's my perspective, is I hear it and I think our job as men is to protect and provide, and we run into natural disasters and violent encounters and situations like this. And being capable of doing that, to me, is a very manly or masculine attribute.
Wow. Well, what you really have to do then is define manly and define masculine. But I think as far as the attribute itself is not limited simply to those of us with lots of testosterone.
Sure, agreed.
In fact, as a survival instructor, I can tell you that taking people out in the wilderness, the majority of the time, any women that I would take out often did much better than the men.
What do you ascribe that to? Because I've talked with professional shooters, for example, those who train firearms instructors, and they will actually say similar things. So what do you attribute that comment to, that women often do better in some of these situations?
Well, it's tricky. I think if I think back on my examples that I might have, I think maybe there's a bit of an expectation on us as the guys in the scenario to be, wildernessy, and we're all little Jeremiah Johnsons kind of thing. And whereas the women show up on a course like this, they don't, that burden is not laid on them. If anything, they're outliers, and what are you doing here, kind of thing. And so they come with I think maybe a sense of calmness. And of course, when it comes to wilderness survival, and perhaps sharpshooting as well, a sense of calmness is really vital. I've heard some say, oh, maybe it's their ability to, women can, because of childbirth and so on, they understand suffering a little better than others. I don't know that I'd agree with that particular version of it. I think it's more that they just seem to be a little calmer about it all. And men have an ego that may at times be difficult for them to separate their own ego from the miserable, cold, rainy night in a shelter with bugs biting, and realizing that if you're calm and cool and collected, you can survive this with a capital S, survive. But if you're going to be all caught up in your own self about it, then yeah, you're going to be freaking out about everything. And women don't seem to do that.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. I think that's generally true. How would, in a survival situation, well, let me back up. Here's where I see ego getting involved with men. If there's other men involved, right? So you've got another man involved and somebody's vying for leadership or some sort of perceived authority, and they're trying to, beat their chest and do this thing at the expense of themselves and the group. But even in a survival situation, when men are alone, how would the ego get in the way of their own ability to survive the situation they're dealing with?
Well, yeah, and I'm just sort of thinking about what you're saying, because really there's 2 points there, and I'm going to kind of relate there to one, which is what you really just described was sort of the same thing as when women say, oh, I don't dress up for the guys at the bar. I dress up for the other girls, right? Same sort of thing, right?
Exactly.
You were just
sure.
saying. And I would counter that and say, from my own experience, I don't know that my ego comes into play too much because of other men. If anything, I'm probably worse off if there's women around, because then that part of my machismo might cause me to overrise to the occasion, if you will.
Sure.
Sort of thing. Yeah. So I forgot where I was going to go with the final sort of answer to your question there, but I just wanted to make that distinction that there is that comparison to women doing what they do for women, men doing what they do for men. I don't think I do. I think, when I actually find myself saying any kind of situation with a lot of men, which, by the way, I'll tangent for a second and I say, which can be a lot easier in some situations for me personally,
to be around other men. Is that what you're saying? or
to be in a challenging situation solely with men. Now, we could dig deep into this, right? So why does Les feel like that? Is it because I feel a cliched, stereotypical sense of my protectionism for the women that might be in that scenario? So I would say sometimes I also have a sense of frustration because, well, if this was just a bunch of guys, we'd be fine. But because we have, a woman along, we have to find the extra bathroom and we have to right? So there's also that too. I'm being really candid here. I've been in many, many survival and search and rescue and wilderness situations, challenging adventure situations with both men and women. And on some occasions, having the co-ed version is phenomenal, really phenomenal to have those mixed personalities we're really achieving. And other times it's detrimental. It's detrimental, I can think of one time I was in Papua New Guinea in the jungle, and there was only one woman on the crew. And she was phenomenal, usually in all these situations. But her desire to make certain that we were all comfortable and that we take breaks and that sort of thing, given the situation, was very frustrating, because what I really wanted to do, and really what everybody else really wanted to do too, was be a guy and bear down and suck it up for 6 hours. No lunch break, no drink break. We got it, because this is the worst part, is getting over this damn hill, this muddy, steep mountain that we got to climb is the worst part. No, we're not going to break for lunch halfway. Right. So that was there's a true life example of a time when I found having a woman in an adventurous situation was detrimental. But I will say, before any women listening to this get mad at me, that the majority of the time, absolutely, I would prefer to have women, men and women, in a co-ed situation.
Yeah, this obviously requires a bit of discernment. And it seems to me that discernment and critical thinking are increasingly lacking in society today, that you make a statement and everybody just applies it broadly and says, well, Les, he's a sexist, or he, because he said, in this one situation, it would have been better. But based on the situation, it's going to call for different things. And your ability to lead is ultimately what's going to, I think, move the needle the most and get people out of this encounter.
Perspective. Right.
Sure.
You're right. And we could probably go on forever on this, but this is a strange era, and it's an era where, an innocent slip of the tongue. Now, one might argue, is it ever innocent? So let's just, for the sake of the argument, say an innocent slip of the tongue, and you're damned for life, sort of thing. And then there are situations where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Right.
Yeah.
Which I find myself in most of the time.
Right. Or if it's misinterpreted incorrectly, you meant it one way and somebody takes it out of context and it gets spun, and then people go off on complete tangents.
Yeah. And thank you, social media, for that.
Right.
Now it's a whole world full of misunderstandings and misquotes.
Yeah. Well, I am glad we're talking about this, because one thing I saw in preparation for this, and I know a bit about you, is that you're a big proponent of Boy Scouts. And over the past several years, I've actually been openly critical about some of the decisions they've made. And one of the things that you talk about is the value of women being included. And I actually think that is not a good thing in the aspect of Boy Scouts. Co-ed, sure, opportunities where young boys and young girls work together. But I also think there's a huge need for boys to learn exclusively from men and be surrounded by exclusively boys. I'd love to hear your take on it.
I agree with you to a limit. And here I've been thinking about this, you can tell. Because I work with Scouts, and I'm very honored to work with Scouts in many occasions. And so I'll state right out that, first of all, I fully support the integration. I think the co-ed situation, just as I've taught co-ed, so when I go out and do my wilderness survival, it's always been co-ed. Sometimes maybe there is just all men. Sometimes it's mostly women, but lots of times it's co-ed. And the value in that is far exceeds locking it down to men and women. So what are we talking about here? If we're talking about the mentorship of young boys, where I think the lacking is not in this big group situation, but the father-son, the uncle-son, the mentor boy, the older man, younger boy. This is coming from a guy who had zero mentorship growing up. And so when I look at the not a controversial dilemma, but certainly a topic of conversation here, the changing of the scouts. I think, what are we losing there? Because part of me in the beginning, absolutely, I'm like, wait a minute, but I want to be with the boys at some point and make fart jokes all night long and be goofy and go skinny dipping, at 14 years of age, not worried that there's girls there, sort of thing, like those kinds of things, because we have to be appropriate, right? So are we saying, well, were you inappropriate when it was a bunch of boys? We weren't inappropriate given that it was only boys.
Right. It's different. The context is different.
It's different. For example, going skinny dipping. Let's just say that. Let's say as a 14-year-old boy, I want to go skinny dipping. Well, I'm not going to do that at high school, right? That would be incredibly inappropriate. But would it be appropriate with my family or with my dad or my buddies at the cottage? That would be appropriate. And as soon as there's a girl, it's now inappropriate. Now, maybe it's also inappropriate with just the boys, but you develop this understanding. I guess you have to go in knowing. You have to go in understanding that our group of guys, me and my 6 buddies, we're going up to the cottage and we're going to hang out and we're probably going to skinny dip. And if you're a man or a boy in that situation and you find that uncomfortable, then you can bow out and say, that doesn't make me comfortable, and I don't want to do that, right? So back to the Boy Scouts and the Scouts situation. I think that the real lacking and the real thing that we're missing out in the argument for only having boys is, but why? It's this mentorship thing. Now, will boys mentor boys? Well, you were a boy once. Do we really? No, we rip on each other, and it's not always fun, and it can be very hurtful. And so boys,
but it can also be productive though, right? I mean, I think about boys, the way that we communicate with each other, and even as grown men, if you and I are friends, I'm going to be poking on you and picking on you a little bit, and making fun of you. And there's probably an element of truth to that. But if we take it with the way it's intended, I think men push harder on each other as a form of accountability, which is positive. I would say.
Yes. The way you just said it. Yeah. The way it really plays out in life, I don't agree with you, because the way we poke on each other in high school is always painful. I was with the in crowd and I was with the picked on crowd. I've been in both, and I can tell you it really hurts. Now, people might push back at you. I'm not pushing back at you, but the what's the phrase, for the sake of debate kind of thing. Someone might say, well, hey, that's great if you're all a bunch of Neanderthals, but that's old school. You know what? We don't do that anymore, right?
Sure.
And I would probably side more on with you and say, well, first of all, I agree. There is definitely a need for stronger sensitivity. I think there's definitely a more sensitive culture that's coming up right now than the culture I grew up in. On the other hand, there's a lot of things that I teach where at some point, my line is, look, I'm really sorry, but at this point, you just got to suck it up. Okay.
Yeah,
you got to suck it up. I get it. We can all be really sensitive in this moment, but what we really need to do is suck it up and get the damn job done. Now, so as boys, I think I see what you're saying. I think as men, we have that opportunity to be men around each other, and as men, we tell fart jokes. It's ridiculous. But the boys, I guess what I'm saying is, and I'm not trying to ride the fence here, by the way, I'm trying to think it through myself.
So am I. That's why I enjoy conversations like this, because I can see it from both sides.
It's an important one. And I think that really, honestly, there's room for all three. What are the biggest complaint we hear from the girls about why they wanted to join the Scouts? Because the Girl Scout sucks.
Right.
Because all they're doing is knitting and needlepoint and baking cookies. So that's what they hear over and over again. And then you hear a counterpoint to that, which is, well, then why don't they just up the Girl Scouts? Mm-hmm. That one is actually something I get. I'm like, yeah, why didn't they? Why didn't they, up the Girl Scouts? Why don't they hear those complaints and get the girls out there surviving and building shelters and make everything like identical to what the boys do, but all girls, and then all boys. And then in the middle, we have like venturers, for example. But I think in the middle, there's room in the middle for simply co-ed Scouts. I think there's room for all three, to be honest with you. One, that we understand this is about boys, and so we're going to be all boys here. This is about girls. And for the sake of the girls, we're going to be all girls here. And this is in the middle. This is about co-ed, and it's about learning from each other as boys, as girls. But so all of this is spinning off of the original question and my original point, which is, what do we miss? What were we afraid of losing with the Boy Scouts, with having them in? I don't think really much of anything. I think just the boys' camaraderie, which you're saying is beneficial. I'm suggesting if it's only the boys, it's like, what's that movie where they're on the island and it's all the boys, the famous movie. Anyway, it can get pretty painful pretty quickly.
And I think, well, I think you're right. So you have like Lord of the Flies is one that comes to mind, right? Is that what you're talking about? Sure.
That's the one. And let me just finish, by the way, but I just want to say that, my point was, the thing that's missing is the adult male to young male mentorship. That's what I don't want to see go by the wayside.
Yeah, I'm really glad you say that, because I see that as being an issue too. And that's a large part of the work that we're doing, is ensuring that we as men, whether you were a biological father or in a fatherhood type role, you said uncle earlier, or a big brother, or some sort of a community leader, or a member of church clergy, we have an obligation to take our knowledge and information and turn around and impart that wisdom on our boys, who we are going to expect to step up and lead and be productive members of society. But if they don't learn it, they're going to be like the Lord of the Flies. You're absolutely right, where it's very destructive and damaging because they don't know how to use their masculine virtues correctly.
And we should. I have not, I tell you, I train and do all the rest of it because I like my masculine virtues. I'm pretty sure my wife likes my chest, and snuggling up to it as I hold her close, you touched on something you said, responsibility. And so, as I said earlier, I grew up with absolutely zero mentorship, zero guidance, nothing. And so one of the downsides of that is that, not necessarily that I got involved in a lot of nefarious things, though I did. The downside is time. You lose an incredible amount of time in your life if you have to figure it out on your own. But if someone is going, can I talk to you about this? And someone is guiding you, you just shaved a year off of what you want to try to accomplish. You just shaved a month off. You just shaved 5 years off. You can shave off so much time with good mentorship in getting to live an effective life as an adult with that mentorship there. But without it, like in my case, I'm a late bloomer in absolutely everything I've ever done, because I've had to figure my first bit of advice I ever got, I was 23 years old. So the first, and not being facetious, I'm not exaggerating my life. The first adult-oriented, calm, concise, good advice I got, I was 23. That's too long. That's way too long. I should have gotten it when I was 10, and I was 23. And so, and that was one bit of advice. And after that, I became a kind of a junkie on self-help books and motivational listening and all of that, I had to teach myself.
Do you feel like your lack of that early mentorship from other men in a way drove you to what you're currently doing because I don't think anybody would doubt that you're a manly man or a masculine man now, right? Because you're in this arena, you're in this world, you're doing these things, and you're surviving and you're teaching others about this. Is it that lack of that drove you to this direction, or not at all? I'm really curious about your perspective on that.
You know what? It's a far more complicated answer, but the short answer is yes. Yes, as you say that, because I'm thinking of pudgy, non-athletic me in grade 10, smoking, drinking, all that. And I reversed all that around. And to this day, at this point, being a little facetious right now, I didn't peak in high school, and now I can look at all those guys who did peak in high school, who might have picked on me, and who were the stars of the football team and the stars of the hockey team. And they all got beer guts out to here, and, many, failed marriages, and probably in some cases failed fatherhoods, and they just don't seem very happy. And so, yes, the short answer being, I think being pudgy me and non-athletic me, when I hit my 20s, I'm like, no more. I want to be a man.
So what turned that for you? Was it a moment or a series of events? Because I know there's a lot of guys who are listening to this right now who are feeling like the 20-year-old version of you. They may be 40 years old, but they feel like that guy. What is it that changed for you where you said, no more of this, here's where I'm going, and then we can talk more about that?
So what is it that changed? It's an interesting way of asking the question. I guess my internal drive. Earlier than that, coming out of high school, I just looked around at the neighborhood I grew up in, which was we had gangs and we had lots of drugs in the neighborhood. And I mean, look, the bottom line is I should be, basically a little bit of a weekend alcoholic, watching the game on TV and working at shipping and receiving. That's what I should be doing. That's what I was meant for coming out of Mimico, Ontario. But I looked around, and no offense to that scenario, many of my good friends are in that scenario and I still love them to death. But I looked around, and whatever it was in me, and you can call it ego if you like, I just thought, no, there's something more. There's got to be something more than this. I know there is. I know I can be more than this. And I don't care what all my teachers have told me. And I don't care what my guidance counselor, how they, humiliated me and told. I was one of those kids that was told by the principal and the teachers and the guidance counselors, you just get a job, Les. You're not going anywhere. And I just thought something inside me said, you're wrong. And I'll show you. I don't know what that is. I to this day, I don't know what that is, but I do know that I didn't know how to manifest it because I didn't have the mentorship. If I had the mentorship, I could have manifested that sooner instead of having to read self-help books for 10 years.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's interesting as you say that. You talk about, I do know that they're wrong and I'm going to prove it to you. I've talked with about 350 very, very successful men in all realms of life. And there's one thread that seems to underpin a lot of these guys. And that is a bit, and maybe this isn't the right way to say it, so you can correct me if I'm phrasing this wrong for you, but a bit of a chip on the shoulder. Like, I'm going to show you, I'll prove it to you, and let me go out and do this and prove others wrong. Do you feel that way, or am I mischaracterizing that?
I think the only slight mischaracterization is that a chip on my shoulder seems like it's out of bitterness. There's some bitterness there. Vindication. No,
maybe an edge. I don't know.
No, it was a belief, my friend. It was just a belief in myself that I shouldn't have had. Given my background, I should not have had belief in myself. But somehow I just kept thinking something in this being's got something to give. And I don't know what it is yet, but I know I'll find a way. It's like, and that's my whole life's been like, okay. And I used to say, like, there's no roadblocks for me. They're always just speed bumps or hurdles. If I have to crawl under them, I'll crawl under them. But one way or another, I'm getting around these. So I think the chip on the shoulder, again, that sort of intimates a little bit of bitterness. And am I bitter? I'm disappointed in my parents. I'm disappointed in my adults, the adults in my world when I was a teenager or younger. But bitter, well, maybe I'm just old enough not to be bitter. I probably was bitter at times. I'm sure I was, but I'm not in at the moment of this conversation. I'm not bitter. I'm just more remembering.
Right. So I know that your transformation into this realm, if I understand correctly, started with Canoe excursions. Is that right? You were in music and you were pursuing that, and then you started taking excursions in the Canoe. Is that right? Is that how this kind of transpired and transformed a little bit? Is that the start of what we're talking about now?
Yes. And so why? It gave me something that I could do well. I could do nothing well in high school. Sure, I tried out for the hockey team, didn't make it. Tried out for the football team, didn't make it. Played hockey, house league and all the rest of it. But sucked. Actually, I was pretty good when I was 21. For about a year and a half, I was really good. You have those moments. It's really weird. It's like,
especially with men out of high school, they start to sprout and get stronger. And right out of high school, I'm like, man, if I could only had that 3-4 years earlier, I would have been golden.
Exactly. And I certainly sprouted after high school in many, many ways. But I think, so the canoeing thing, it was like a church group. It was a church group trip. And we went to Tamagami, Ontario, a place up in Canada. And it's a beautiful, pristine canoeing country. And, it was just this little 1 week or 2 week canoe trip. But in my head, it could have been the greatest adventure ever. Like, I might as well have been in the Amazon jungle, which I eventually went to, obviously. It was such a break free from what I associated it with my neighborhood. And so some of the stuff that I hear you asking and that we're talking about, and I know that we are speaking to a lot of other men right now that maybe want to break out of where they're in, sort of thing. And a big thing for me with the canoeing, which was new friends, right? Because my friends in high school, that was not a thing. But through church and these people, I found this thing, and off we go canoeing. And I'm good at it. And I'm like, quickly, what it did was it told me with this new opportunity that I did not have to go back to my toxic friends. I did not have to, there were not just the 6 or 7 guys I could call, who some of them I love to this day, but let's face it, at the time, their attitudes were more toxic. And I mean toxic with a small t. I don't mean that as negative, as dark as it sounds. It's something that we, I think, overuse a lot of times. You say, oh, you got to get away from your toxic people. And it's the right word, I think, to get the point across, but it's not necessarily as dark. Sometimes it's not very dark at all, but it still withholds you. I remember through the canoeing, and I had quit smoking and I was becoming more healthy. And one of my best buddies from high school said, what do you mean I can't smoke in your house? I said, come on, Ronnie. I was like, I just don't want anybody smoking in my house anymore. Well, I'm not coming over then. Right. And so, but, and God love him, but okay, then don't come over. Cause you know what? Like, I'm past that, like, right, sort of thing. And so, yeah, the canoe trip taught me that there was another world out there. And when I finally discovered it, it was much bigger than I ever could have dreamed.
And so when you started to see and that other world started to unfold, before you, and you started to move closer towards it, did you have some sort of an idea that you were going to turn this into a career, that you were going to turn this into a money-making venture, that it was going to support your lifestyle? Or was it, this is a hobby, I enjoy doing it, and that's what it is, and period, end of discussion?
Never a hobby and never about the money. I finally found my first goal in life. So, for example, one of the things that I learned later in life was what I call the joy of completion, which is actually finishing something you started. Right? And I didn't know that. I was a long time. But I found, even before that, I found my first goal. And my goal? I love this so much. I want to become the best guide in Canada. I want to be like an outdoor guide that people know about. Because I saw some guys that were like that, right? Like, right, oh, have you ever tripped with him? Oh, yeah, he's a canoe god. You got to go learn from him. I wanted to be that guy.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I had a goal. And how do I get to that goal? Easy peasy. Take some courses. Get a bunch of certificates. Be an intern. Be an assistant guide. I did all that. That's what I did. I want to be one of the best guides that Canada has to offer. And I don't know if I can ever boast that. I do know that I became an excellent guide.
Yeah, that's it. I wrote that down. I've been taking notes, and you probably see me taking notes here. I'm not checking my text or anything, but I wrote down that concept of the joy of completion. I've never heard it put that way, but that is a really, really powerful way of looking at it, because I think so many of us, myself included, fall into the trap of getting excited about something. We see that bright and shiny object or something we want to pursue. And we're so fickle in general that we do it and we get started. And then at the first little slight of challenge or hardship, we're like, oh yeah, see, this wasn't meant to be. And we use it as an excuse to throw in the towel when we could have built all that confidence and credibility if we would have just stuck through and completed the dang thing.
And I was quite older in my late 20s. No, older than that. when I first finished something creatively. So I did accomplish my goal of becoming a guide and a strong guide. So, but I didn't see it as such. I didn't see it really as a completion. The joy of completion I discovered, which was based on my original desires in life, which was to be a rock star. I wanted to be Neil Young. I wanted to be Jimmy Page, right? I wanted to be that. Well, that didn't work out. And it was the Canoe trip that showed me that, you know what? And I was actually doing pretty good at it. I was producing for Much Music up in Canada. I was, I had music being shopped to Bruce Springsteen. Like I was in a good place.
Sure.
So let me dance around this a little bit here, just to catch us up. I was in a good place musically. So what was wrong? I still had no guidance, no mentorship. Nobody said, Les, you're sitting there right now with this in your hands. Okay, you need to bust a move and make this happen. Instead, I went and played hockey. I went and played tennis. I went jogging. I just sort of, oh, I should write another song. Well, tomorrow, right? So the music came up against that. And then I found the Canoe trip, and then I became a guide. So after a few years of being that guide, and now I'm going to get to the joy of completion here, and why for every man listening, understand that the joy of completion is vital to achieve. And well, here, I'll just use the word. Here's what I want to say what it is. It's euphoric. From a guy who'd never completed anything he really started, okay, I then endeavored to get back into music. And I write a bit of acoustic songs, singing about nature, stuff like that. I produced, and I went and I lived out in the woods with my then wife for the film called Snowshoes and Salted. All right. So I lived in the woods for a year, and I filmed it on camera, and I was writing some songs, but there's no completion there, right? That's just, I'm just doing. So any hard knock that could come my way, I could just have stopped that and knocked that off and said, okay, well, you don't need to finish the film. You did the year in the bush. You're fine. You don't need to record the songs. You've written them. They're fine. No, I knew that there needed to be an end goal with this music I was doing and this film that I had made about my adventure in the woods with Sue. So it took me 5 years. Somehow I bared down, got the CD done and the DVD. Now that was the day that I stood there with a CD in my hands and a DVD in my hands, almost virtually the same day that I had done. And that's when the euphoria of the joy of completion hit me. And I thought, oh my God, why have I not been doing this my whole life? No one told me how good it feels to finish. That's an important line. No one ever told me how good it feels to finish. And when I discovered how good it felt to finish, dude, my whole life since then has been about finishing what I started, which on a tangent note doesn't mean you shouldn't quit certain things that you do start when they turn out to be wrong. But that messiness aside, I finish what I start, even if it hurts. I finish what I start because that's my word. I've got a film I need to finish right now. I don't really want to, but I'm going to, because I gave my word that I would finish this particular film that I was in. And that's something I think men need to learn and understand. And if you're 45 and you still don't know this, okay, finish that thing. Actually, there are, sorry, I'll just ramble on a little bit more. There are these men that are that age, my age, younger than me. I meet them all the time. I was thinking about this and I was thinking about that. And sometimes you're 47. You're just going to keep thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I have a point to make on that, but I'll shut up for a second.
No, I'm just listening. I'm taking notes. I'm just listening. You said something interesting. You said finish is my word. What did you mean by that? Is that something that like it's a mantra or something that runs in your head? Like finish, finish, finish. What did you exactly mean by that?
No, it's just an obvious, that description to finish something is obvious. But we take it for granted. I forgot where I was going to go with that. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. Do you think this concept of finishing and there's a theme here that I keep hearing you say, which is I didn't have that mentorship. Nobody showed me. Do you feel like you are, I don't know if called is the right word, but called to do that for other people? Is that where a lot of the teaching and the instruction and the desire to help improve other people comes from? Does it come from that?
I don't allow myself to think that. What I want to do is to contribute. So there's a lot of tangents we can go on here. I think there are three ways in which we can contribute. And I will say, you talked earlier about the responsibility of an adult to be that mentor to a young person. That's a responsibility we have. I think as human beings, we have a responsibility to contribute in some way, especially those of us here in North America. I mean, looking at you and looking at me, we're not hard done by. Hopefully we're decent men. But I'm not disadvantaged in my scenario. I was disadvantaged as a youth. I'm not now. So the three ways that we can live, or the three ways that we contribute or the three ways to live us. You either contribute globally, you contribute to your community, or you live selfishly. Usually what I say is the three ways to live: selfishly, for the community, or globally. All right, now, selfishly. Selfishness has to happen. That's why we go to university. That's why you train in the morning. That's whatever you do for yourself to improve yourself, that's called, you got to be selfish about it. My daughter's a triathlete. She's in a selfish mode to be a triathlete. And I fully applaud that. It's like, you got to focus on you right now. You can be altruistic later. Right now, be selfish, right? Learn what you need to learn. So that's one mode. But the problem is some people, if I'm being a little critical, get stuck in that mode forever. That's the only mode they live in. And selfishness is their life, right? And, come what may the world, and I'll just sit here on the dock with my beer and not worry about anything. It's like, to me, that's, why wouldn't you want to try to contribute? Now we have globally or community. And Godspeed to the soccer moms and the soccer dads and those people that have the community center things and the programs and all that stuff. They're fantastic. I can't do that. It's not me. It's never been me to do that. When John Lennon said, I don't want to reach 10 people, I want to reach 10 million, I understood what he meant. I'm like, yeah, I know what he means. I know exactly what he means. So I went globally. So I see the work that I do as a creator, right, as a filmmaker and mostly as a storyteller, more than anything. I see it. I like to get it out there in a global way and just release it to the wind, if you will. And I like that because it could be helping people I'll never, ever meet. I know that's the case, or never hear from. Nowadays with social media, I get posts and I see the thank yous and things like that. Okay, that's great. But that's not, I just like to put it all out there. And it's kind of awesome to wonder you write a song and put it out, wonder what it's going to do. Well, and then I'll see a post from some guy who says, that song of yours, Dark Side. Well, I'm bipolar and I suffer from suicidal thoughts every now and again. And when I go down that road, I listen to your song, Dark Side, and it brings me out of it. So I was in tears reading that, that's one thing, right? Or because of you, I wanted to get back out in nature. And obviously, Survivorman was a big thing for stuff like that. So there's our three ways to live. And if not globally, then community-wise, and doing things for the community. And then there's hybrids too. They're sort of mixing and doing a little bit of both. But selfish is good, but not forever. So I'm not sure. I didn't answer a question, but anyway, there you go.
Yeah, no, it was great. So you define yourself just barely as a storyteller, but why are the stories you're telling do they revolve around survivalship and the outdoors? I mean, obviously that's a big part of your life, but you could tell any story, you could have any conversation. There's all kinds of experiences you could have. Why does this speak to you? And why do you feel like you want to share this in particular?
It's the thing that keeps me most alive, that drives me the most, but I don't know why. Why does someone obsess over playing piano? Why does an engineer obsess over coming up with a new way to determine angles and build a building? I just can't not be in love with nature. I can't not be passionate about nature. It's just so easy for me to dream and think about nature 24/7. And so that's what comes out in the work that I do pretty obviously. Now, I'm not a one-trick pony. I have other interests in other things, and they slip out as well. So I don't know the why, but I do. But the end goal of it is to take someone like you and say, like, okay, maybe you're a gamer. Maybe you like living in the middle of Chicago. Maybe, you're afraid of bugs. That's fine. But if I could just get you to walk in a forest, just for a day on a manicured trail where maybe they've even, God forbid, but maybe they've even sprayed it with paramecium so there's no mosquitoes biting you, whatever. If I could just get you on that trail under a bunch of trees in the park at the end of your road, maybe. That's like the minimalist part of my goal, is just to get people to reconnect with a tree, if you will.
Yeah. And I wish more of us would do that more often. I know that every time I'm out in nature, whether, like you said, a walk around our field, looking at the trees and the wildlife, or being on a hunt or a camp out, it just grounds us. And it's becoming increasingly rare. We live in these concrete jungles and we're always in cubicles and we don't talk to each other and we don't connect and we aren't where we've evolved to be. I wish more people would do this and take advantage of it.
It would make it. First of all, science is behind it now. I mean, the science has been going over that for quite a while. A human being in the hospital suffering requires less painkillers and heals faster if all they can do is see a tree outside their window.
Interesting.
Now, let's expand that into if they could be in nature. When you forget aromatherapy, you walk in the woods, there's a billion chemical combinations that are bombarding you. And what I love about nature is whether you like it or not, it's working on you. Whether you could go in there with the worst mood of all, vindictive and angry, because like I have to take down my tent platform because the building inspector says it's too big right now. So I'm mad about that. If I go walking in the woods just 20 feet to the right of my tent platform, I feel better all of a sudden. So, it works on you whether you want it to or not. And I want to just hop back on one point we made about this idea of finishing and accomplishing goals. So a point that I like to make a lot, and it's for all the men and women out there listening, and whether you're 65 or 25 or everything in between, just remember this about your big idea, your concept, the goal you want to achieve, the thing you want to do. It's yours and yours alone to complete. You can walk in a boardroom and say, here's my idea, everybody. Let's all work on this. But if you walk out of that boardroom, it's going to die. Most of the time, those things just die right on the vine. I mean, I'm not saying if you're a boss and you're giving directives and orders. I mean, if it's your idea, you're the one who has to complete it, because you could sit in a room with some people that are really good at the thing that you want to do. It's still up to you to do it. And this is the thing we forget. We think, and here's what I want to say. Here's how I want to put this, and I won't be vulgar, but I do want to put it this way, so that I make my point. Your mom, your wife, your brother, your sister, your kids, your friends, your mentors, they're going to support you, might even lend you a hand. They're going to encourage you, but they don't really give a crap whether you finish it or not. They really don't. They have their own lives to worry about. They have their own goals, their own things to do. They're working on this and on that. Oh, you should do that, Les. Yeah, no, yeah. Let me know if you need a hand. But they truly, in the end, yes, even your mom and your dad, they really don't give a. Well, I just want you to be happy, dear. Right? But that thing that's burning in you that you want to accomplish, it's just you. It's just yours. So if you're not going to do it, it'll die on the vine. Forget about it. You might as well just throw it away, because with all the good talk around you and everything, that's all lovely, but it's still up to you to get up in the morning, to bust a move and to complete it, to finish what you started. Most people, nobody else out there cares whether or not you finish what you start. I have an amazing wife who I adore and who is the most supportive human being I've ever been with. But she's not going to browbeat me into finishing what I started.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to just be disappointed when I don't.
Right. That's true. It's interesting you say this. I just had an amicable exchange on social media from a gentleman who seemed to be, the way he worded his comments, that he was, complaining that nobody was in his corner and nobody was happy for him or supported him. And my thought and response was, why is your action contingent upon whether or not somebody's happy for you? What does that have to do with anything? Try to satisfy yourself. That goes back to the selfish contribution that you were talking about earlier. At first, I think it needs to be that. I want to feel happy with myself. I want to be fulfilled. I want to feel good about being a man of my word, which you alluded to as well.
Absolutely. I would say the same thing. I'd say, dude, it's not about them. And they don't really care. Yeah, this is okay. So here's my insensitive moment where I say, yeah, suck it up. They don't really care.
Right.
So do you want this thing or don't you? You do really want it. Okay. Are there mentors you can talk to that know how to get this thing? Is there a book you can read? Go listen to Tim Ferriss. I don't know, but suck it up, and again, I can be accused. I don't mean that so harshly. I can be accused of being insensitive that way, but I just think there's a time and a place to say, yeah, no, nobody else cares about this, but I do. And that's how my life was. That's how I was going back to our high school talk. And nobody gave a crap about me and nobody gave a crap about my ideas, but I somehow had enough depth of ego, if you will, to care, to say, but I do, I'll find a way. And it took me 30 bloody years, but I found a way.
Well, you say that might be the insensitive side of me speaking, but I'd counter that and say that somebody who's going to tell you the truth or frame an idea or concept in a way that you need to hear it at just the right moment might actually be the best thing that you can do for an individual. Like, I don't necessarily believe that you're being sensitive because you're being soft on somebody or you're sparing them of their feelings. That to me might not be that you're sensitive to what they need at all.
That's a very, very good point. And thank you for that, actually, because that's one of my things in life is I love if somebody is blunt with me. I love if somebody is candid and straight with me. I hate beating around the bush. And so by virtue of that, I am that way. But sometimes I fail to recognize that this person would rather beat around the bush. They need some beating around the bush. And I'm like, well, just do this.
Right. Right. Yeah, true. So you got to read the room a little bit.
I was just discussing this this morning, actually, about being situationally aware, and this would be on an interpersonal level, being situationally aware. It's like, yeah, this guy needs to hear something straight right now because he's whining. So he's whining. So he's going to have to hear it like he's a whiner. And here you go. Here it is. Or this person is really seeking and they're a little fragile. Okay, let's move a little slowly on this one. That's as I say, be a different version of sensitive, I suppose. I like your point. I like your point a lot.
One of the things that we talked about before we hit record is you were talking about the children's book that you're writing. And I'm really curious about where this pivot comes from, because this is a new angle for you. Was this a goal of yours? Did this pop up? Have you always had an interest in teaching kids and introducing them to the outdoors and survival and all this kind of stuff? Like, where does that transition or pivot come from?
It's not a pivot at all. Not a transition at all. First of all, as a guide for the aforementioned guiding work, I mean, hundreds and thousands of kids I guided out in the wilderness and taught skills and taught canoeing and everything else. So I always had that. I always get along with kids. I adore most ages of kids, actually.
Which ones don't you adore? That's actually what I'm very curious about.
I think that sort of 11 to 15,
yes.
16, I could do without that era.
Yes.
Like 2 to 10 is those little bare feet in their pajamas and they're curled up and they just want to snuggle and you read. I love that. And then as they become older and they're starting to spread their young adult wings, they become, so that. And then, but with Survivorman, I had kids sending me Facebook pictures of them dressed up as me for Halloween. So if that isn't an endorsement, I don't know what is, right? So I knew all along that my manual called Survive, still available, still out in the bookstores now. Pound for pound, I will put it up against any survival book out there, including the SAS survival book. We can get into that on another conversation. But I did that book, and it's owned by thousands and thousands of kids. So I knew that kids just adore nature. They love nature inherently, as we all did at one point. And they're much less afraid of it, especially when they're young. So this book gave me the opportunity to speak directly to them, to tell them my stories, to teach lessons through the stories, to give them some things they can do at home, all in the form that I'm not talking to your teacher or your mom or your dad. I'm talking to you. And so it was an opportunity to do something that I've always been doing, but just direct to them.
Right. And it probably goes into that. I don't want to reach 10 people. I want to reach 10 million people, or in this case, 10 million kids. And I can do it this way through this medium and this outlet and technology that we have access to.
Absolutely. And, Anik Press out of Toronto, originally I approached them because I wanted to write fiction. I wanted to write fiction adventure stories.
Oh, interesting.
But my I guess the stigma, if you will, of Survivorman is that, well, but you've written all these nonfiction books and you're a documentary. How about a nonfiction book? Okay,
stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. You hear right? Yeah. Sure.
So I will, and then one day I will write my novel, and I will write my nonfiction, my fiction books, and I'll prove them wrong.
Yes, I like it. I'm anxious to see. It is interesting with kids too. I've noticed this specifically in my oldest son because he's very enamored with nature and wildlife. And children are not so busy. They don't come up with excuses. They don't get as bored. They're creative and they're thoughtful and they see things differently than we do. My oldest son yesterday said, "Dad, there's a turkey in our field," which isn't uncommon. And I said, "Okay, that's yes." And he said, "Well, he's injured." I'm like, "Well, how do you know?" He's like, "I walked down there and I saw him hobbling around." And so this morning, even before I got home, and I get home early from jujitsu about 7:00 in the morning, I got home and he wasn't in the house. I'm like, where's my son? Where's Brecken? And he was out in the field trying to find this turkey, because he's injured, and he actually saw him and he saw him hobble off. And he just spent an hour out there wandering around chasing this turkey. And I think you're hitting on it right now is that they just love it. And if we could just hone it and refine it and guide it and instruct it and foster it, man, the world would be a different place.
Well, I would go heavy on the last word, foster it, because true to form, you don't want them doing things that are destructive out there inadvertently.
Of course.
So you want to teach them that way. Absolutely. But fostering it. Yeah. And that's that whole so I have, how old's your oldest son, if I may ask?
13.
He's 13. Oh, wonderful age. Okay, we're going to get
that horrible age you hate. That horrible age. Yeah. You said wonderful, but you already told me earlier you hate that age.
Well, you're in for it for the next few years.
Definitely.
I do hear, and I would agree in my case, that boys are easier than girls when you're the guy, when you're the dad. So you can be the buddy, right? And I'm best friends with my son. My son is 23 now, and he's a wildfire fighter and a paramedic. And he and I are as close as two high school friends.
That's awesome.
Which I absolutely adore. And I got him out in nature a lot. So, but fostering it, you're getting them out there and allowing them to experience it on their terms. Empowering our kids to do things on their terms is a really big thing for me as a father. It always has been. It's like, well, okay, you want to do it that way? And it's like, I can see no harm's going to come of it. It's the wrong way to do it, but it's the way he wants to do it. So I've already suggested another way, but he wants to do it this way. Okay, go for it. And obviously we're being the protectors. We're making sure that there's no danger involved and stuff like that. But
controlled
I think that's wonderful that your son did that. We'll have to make sure we get you a copy of Wild Outside for him.
Oh yeah, he'd be all about it. Well, you're also touching on something I wrote down here that I wanted to address with you. One thing that I think you do a great job with is making sure that you don't show only and exclusively you doing everything right and correct and accurate. You seem to be so well-rounded and confident enough that you're willing to show some of the things that don't work out or the things where you maybe made a mistake or stepped in the wrong place. And I really respect somebody who can show that well-rounded picture as opposed to just the highlight reel. Just the hero moments. Right. Exactly. Well, thank you for the wonderful compliment of well-roundedness. And I think, and confidence. Yes, they're there. That is there in my skills as a wilderness individual, adventurer, if you will, or survival guy. However, the motivation behind it, because if you watch the Survivorman episodes, all I'm really doing in every single episode is teaching. I'm just teaching. I mean, so we had to leave it, without Survivorman, you don't have the rest of the industry. When it comes to survival TV, you don't have Alone, Naked and Afraid, Man versus Wild, Dual Survival. You don't, and without Survivorman. When they happened, because they saw how successful mine had become, they didn't endeavor to teach anything. Not really. They were looking for sensationalistic things in the different survival books and say, you guys do this one now. Entertainment, right? Entertain us, right? So their goal was not to teach. My goal was to be, from the beginning to the end, and still is, to teach. And we all know that failure is a great teacher. And so if I had something like, if you said to me, hey, Les, have you ever heard about starting a fire with, a pop can and a piece of chocolate? I've heard that you can polish it and do that.
start a fire, So I did that on one of the episodes, for example. I did not practice that ahead of time. Anything that I could do that I'd only just heard about, I'm like, I'm not going to practice it, because if I practice it, who am I? I'm guru guy. Look at me. I'm good at everything I do. If I don't practice it and I fail, you see it, basically live sort of thing. You see it live right there and then. It's like, yeah, okay, I blew it. And I have my shelter burned down. I've made some crappy shelters, things like that, to show that that's what you're going to do. You're not going to get a fire going every time with a little twig and some thread. Right. You're going to fail. So you might as well see me fail, because if I fail, now you can see me get out of the mess I'm in. Okay, I failed. I don't have a fire tonight. And I've spent all my time on the fire. I didn't make a shelter. What am I going to do now? Right. And now we have what is real drama, what's really going on. And that's why I love showing failure that way. And quickly, I'll just say that with the father-son conversation and father-daughter conversation, when my kids ask me any question, I always answer honestly, even if it's painful. Obviously, there was a time when I filtered it for age a little bit.
Sure, right.
But for the most part, if they asked me, Dad, did you ever do this or did you ever do that? And I knew the answer was yes, I'd say yes. And then that would become a 2-hour conversation, right? Because then I could explain myself and why and this and that. And so, I think it's the same sort of philosophy. It's like, as a father, showing my kids that, yeah, I'm a failure too. I have lots of failures in my life, but I'm still going,
Well, and one of the other powerful points of sharing the truth and sharing the failures and the setbacks, as well as the victories, is you're setting up realistic expectations for those you're trying to lead. So the people who are following you and watching, who may want to get more closely connected with nature or get into survival scenarios, they're going to see that and have a realistic expectation versus just assuming that everything goes right. And then when they find themselves in a dangerous situation, they either don't keep themselves protected, or they think shitty of themselves because, well, like everybody else I follow along with is just perfect. So what's wrong with me? And it creates, I think, a confidence issue that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, unrealistic expectations. Absolutely. And I think that goes all the way back to one of your very first questions, which is why women versus men in a wilderness situation. I don't think women have those big expectations, but as men, right? I'm going to have the best fire, the best shelter. I'll probably even catch a grouse. Well, we're all these students on this weekend of survival. They're going to see how I do, and I don't think women go into it like that.
Do you find that along the same lines that women are more willing to ask questions than men are because of the reason you're explaining right now?
The reason why I'm pausing is because the short answer is yes, but my hesitancy is because I'm not that guy. I ask everybody everything. I have no ego saying, hey, I'm not getting this. How do I do it? Like, I have no problem asking. I roll as well. I do jujitsu.
Oh, do you? Oh, good. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I'll have to roll sometime, and you can
That'd be great.
Pin me in 4 seconds, or I'll tap out in 4 seconds.
Fair.
And same thing there. Case in point, for example, my personality is such that, so I'm there, and let's face it, they all know who I am. They all know that Survivorman's in our club.
Right.
So,
right.
Now, of course, the bad part is I've got like a lot of 30-year-olds who are ripped and are blue belts, and they want to make Survivorman taps like nothing.
Yes, you have a target at this point.
I have a target on my back, but I'm never afraid in those classes to go, can you show me that again? Because I'm not getting where my arm's supposed to go. I keep, and so I've just never. So anyway, I'm being meandering, but bottom line is I'm not that guy. I have no problem asking questions. I'll ask for directions. Here's my this is not going to endear me to any women who might be listening, but my one, I think I only have 2 moments in my life where I'm just blatantly sexist, and I'm very sorry, but I don't apologize at the same time. And one of them is asking directions. Just like I've done it 1,000 times, and I will actually not pull over to ask a woman directions anymore. Every woman out there is just so mad at me right now. I know, but I'm sorry, but I've tried so hard, and just like, of course, I will have men be pretty bad at it too. But if I'm gambling, I'll look for a guy.
Yeah. Well, look, I think we all have those moments and those things that that we're dealing with. So again, I appreciate the transparency and you sharing all of it for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, transparency is, you know, the thing about the transparency in myself and the candidness is it enables me to be me. It means that I never have to come back at you and say, oh, did I say that before? Oops. I don't ever want to be in that position. You know, early on, I was asked to cheat Survivorman. That's how these other shows were created, because I refused to cheat my show.
What do you mean by cheat?
Have a crew build the stuff, sleep in a hotel every night, fake the whole thing.
Got it.
Make a show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first time I was asked, and I looked at the producer guy, and I said, listen, the way this show's going, I may very, very well end up finding myself sitting across from Jimmy Fallon, you know, which I did, by the way.
Yeah.
Or Ellen or somebody like that, which I did. I don't want to be sitting there and have them say to me, so what was it like that night when the tiger came in and and I'm going, well, it was all a bunch of crap. We made it up.
Right.
I said, I'm not going to be that guy. No way. I don't want to ever have to be, because you guys can all walk away. I'm the guy on a television screen sitting, talking to somebody, supposedly being an honest man. I won't do it, you know? So that's where the transparency comes in. I think it's easier to be transparent as far as I'm concerned.
Definitely over the long haul, because you're not having to trip all over yourself and stumble over yourself or get caught and all these other things. And then not to mention the real motive, which is just being truthful to yourself and being able to look the man in the mirror right in the eye and be okay with that.
Yeah. And listen, none of us are saints. Every single one of us has, you know, regret and regretful things we've said, regretful things we've done. And I remind myself of this fact all the time. If I were to be critical of someone else, is to remind myself, don't forget about you, Les. Don't forget some of the crap you've done, you know? And honestly, I don't think that'll ever change. I think to my grave, I'll be someone tiptoeing around the temptation to even just fib, you know, the temptation. And I will fib again. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'll lie again outright. Now we're getting nuanced, aren't we? We're really slicing it down. But you know what I mean? Like, sure. I think everyone should understand that none of us. Okay, I'm a fan of the Avengers movies, and so one of the great lines I just heard from Loki was, if there's one thing that I've learned in all of this, is that nobody that is bad is truly bad, and nobody that is good is truly good. And I thought, damn, I wish I'd said that.
Maybe you can rephrase it or something like that, but the point is well taken. Well, Les, I really respect you. I appreciate you coming on. I know you've got some projects. You've got Wild Outside, which is the children's book coming out. You've got the Surviving Disasters, which is that's a PBS. Is that a documentary or a series? What exactly is that?
So it's actually a pledge special. So, you know, on American Public Television, they do the pledge specials. You can phone in and you can. So they highlighted it for that. It'll be back on in August for a couple of weeks. And then they keep putting it on every few months as a pledge special. It's called Surviving Disasters with Les Stroud. And this is a documented instructional piece, if you will, on how your aunt and uncle who live in Florida can handle the next hurricane. It's not about preppers. It's not about having your bug out bag. And it is, of course, that's in there. But it's about what all the regular people need to know to prepare for earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, windstorms, flooding, blackouts, freeze-outs, all of that. And really proud of that. So that's a 90-minute documentary that's on PBS, and it's a pledge special. And then I also have on the PBS stations, this is all presented by American Public Television. Mm-hmm. It goes on the PBS stations. Les Stroud's Wild Harvest. And it's a bit of an extension of Survivorman in a way. It's focused entirely on, I take you out and I show you all the local wild edibles, stuff that's on your lawn right outside the room you're in right now, or wherever there's a closest bit of anything growing. I'll take you right out there. Plus, we go further afield, show you all the local wild ingredients that you can harvest. And then I'll bring 1 or 2 or 3 home. And then I give them to Chef Paul Rogalski from Calgary, Alberta, and he turns them into a 5-star meal. And so you Amazing. Really, it's not about survival. That's one of my points is it's a lot of these plants, all I know them for is surviving. Now, Paul turns them into this amazing dish. whether it's dandelion or fireweed, or sometimes we've had some meat in the show as well, here and there. We even did roadkill.
Oh, you did? Interesting.
What
was it?
Well, the longer story is simply we went out to go harvest mushrooms, pine mushrooms, matsutakis. And we did that day a huge amount. It was amazing. We just pulled out of my driveway in the middle of the road, laying there, unbloodied, unbroken, just obviously been clipped on the head, wild turkey.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So I brought it home, still warm, brought it home, and we showed, and I said, look, I know, look, roadkill sounds repugnant, but look what we made. Honestly, it was the best turkey I ever had in my life. So,
is that right?
So anyway, that's Les Stroud's Wild Harvest on public television. Surviving Disasters with Les Stroud on public television. My new book, Wild Outside, for children, ages anywhere from 7 to 15. And then, and lastly, for anybody who actually doesn't mind my music at all, my big sort of progressive rock album that features Slash and Steve Vai, called Mother Earth. I'm putting it out on it's a double vinyl album coming out very soon.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Busy for sure.
Always. Well, and in all fairness here and truth is that I thought this conversation would go completely different than it did. We didn't talk hardly anything about tactics and strategies and survival and all that stuff. But this was an important conversation. We went way deeper into some things. Yeah, next time. But the conversation we had was great. Suffice it to say, guys, if you really want to know about survival and the tactics and the strategies, Les is your guy. So there's plenty of information out there. And now you get to see a different side of him and some deeper conversations and thoughtfulness that we had today, which was good, I think.